The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. If you would like to find out about the broadcast schedule of the X Zone Broadcast Network and when you can listen to the X Zone on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And if you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is Robert Felix. He is a former architect, became vitally interested in the dinosaur extinction in 1991. He spent the next 8 years, full-time I might add, researching and writing not by fire but by ice. Felix learned that many magnetic reversals, more than could be mere coincidence, had occurred in sync with both mass extinctions and ice ages. Why did ice ages so often coincide with magnetic reversals, you wondered? He came to the conclusion that the dinosaurs were killed by an ice age triggered by a magnetic reversal, and that the next big ice age could begin at any time, any day. Today, 29 years later, Robert is more convinced than ever that we are now entering an ice age. His primary website is iceagenow.info, which he started in 1997. To date, it has received more than 46 million hits. Wow. Robert wrote the following follow-up book, Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps, in which he challenges Darwin's ideas of slow, stately evolution. Joining me now is Robert Felix. And Robert, welcome back to the X Zone.
Thank you, Rob. I'm glad to be here.
Can you give us a brief overview as to why you think we're headed back to an ice age? And with this hot weather, I would kind of welcome it.
Well, yeah, but actually, there's a cycle to ice ages. And what I'm saying is an ice age could begin any day, and when it begins, it will begin with a bang. But what we're talking about in all of these cycles, there's a solar retrograde cycle. I learned about this when I was first studying this. And it's about every 180 years or so that Saturn and Jupiter are both on the same side of the sun. Mm-hmm. And they tug on it, and that causes the solar retrograde cycle. Then you double that cycle about every 360 years. There is a little ice age cycle, and then you multiply that out. There's the Milankovitch cycle. About every 11,500 years, as I study the geological history, I see that every 11,500 years we have, sometimes it's a smaller ice age, sometimes it's a larger one. And then if you stretch that out, every 105,000 years is another cycle. It's called orbital stretch. And what happens is that the sun's orbit around the sun, we always think of it as being a circle.
Right.
But it actually is elliptical. And so that our orbit around the sun, sometimes we're closer to the sun, sometimes we're closer. we're farther away. But every 105,000 years, that triggers a larger ice age. And, well, that's the whole point, is that every single one of those cycles is due. Now, I'm not saying it's due tomorrow, but it could well be. And so that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, let me ask you this, Rob.
Sure.
When did the last ice age actually end?
Well, it was approximately, okay, there was a bigger one that started about 23,000 years ago.
Okay.
That stuck around for about 6,000 years. I mean, so when they hit, they're not going to be over tomorrow. But
I can see that.
What had happened, and one of the ways that scientists can tell this, is they look at sea levels. Is that during an ice age, most of Canada, even where you are, most of Canada is covered by 1 to 2 miles of ice, straight up. And it extends down into the United States, but then that ice builds up and builds up and builds up, and so it reached its major extent about 18,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then it started melting again, and then about 11,500 years ago, 12,000 years ago, wham, we went into another ice age. That wasn't as big, but it was the one that killed the mammoths, so that's big enough.
It sure is.
So and then we have been warming up ever since 11,500 years ago, essentially. So whenever I hear people talk about global warming, well, of course it is. That's what it does after an ice age ends. But we're due for the next one any day, and I just hate to see people get blindsided by this.
So what about global warming? How does this figure into the entire scenario? You said that this is what happens after an ice age, but if my memory serves me correct, going back into school days many years ago, and contrary to public belief, I did not go to school with Fred Flintstone, so let's get that right out of the way right now. But, there wasn't the industry in the world that the carbon problems, the carbon emissions that we're seeing today, the hole in the ozone layer, do they play a contributing factor into the speed of which the next ice age is going to hit us, as well as the next ice age's magnitude?
No, I don't think that they have anything to do.
Really, eh?
Well, for one thing, I don't think that our emissions, our carbon dioxide emissions, maybe the other emissions, but our carbon dioxide emissions have nothing whatsoever to do with global warming. The fact is the CO2 rises at a different rate than the temperature rises. There's just no scientific correlation. It just drives me nuts to see people trying to correlate CO2 with global warming. It's not there. This global warming, I agree there's global warming, but it's a natural cycle. It's not caused by humans as far as I'm concerned.
What's it caused by?
It's caused by the sun. The sun, for a while here in the last 20 years, the sun has been the most active that it had been in 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're looking at the activity on the sun slowing down. And so, of course, we're going to be seeing things cool down. And the other part of it is, and you mentioned in my biography, but the other part of it is magnetic reversals. Now, before I started writing the book, I hate to say this, but I had never realized that there had ever been such a thing as a magnetic reversal on Earth. I just didn't get it. Now, for people who aren't sure what I'm talking about, it's a magnetic reversal is a time when, in the past, when compasses would have pointed toward the Antarctica instead of toward the Arctic.
So are you talking about a polar shift?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm not now. Some people think a polar shift is being that the Earth turns upside down. That's not what I'm talking about. As far as I can tell, the Earth still remains oriented the way it is.
Right.
It's just that compasses change direction. Is that the magnetic field itself?
But if the magnetic field changes, wouldn't that mean that any electronics that we have now would be totally useless, since all our electronics are geared to the magnetic field as it is now?
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right,
Now-
Robert, stand by.
now-
We have to take our first break, so please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour, very interesting gentleman. His name is Robert Felix. His website is www.iceagenow.info. That's iceagenow.info. And when we come back from this commercial break, we'll be joining Robert again, talking about this very interesting subject. Here we are in the middle of a heat wave. And I'll tell you something, I don't want an ice age. I would just like to be back in the 70s, 71, 72. But I guess if we have an ice age coming, hey, I shouldn't be complaining, should I? Also, I'd like to thank everyone who went to xzoneradiotv.com and downloaded the interview that I did last night with my good friend and fellow host here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Kevin Randall, who's the host of A Different Perspective, as we both discussed the arrest of Jan Harzan, the executive director, or the former executive director of MUFON. Once again, you can go and listen to that interview we did simply by going to xzoneradiotv.com. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with Robert Felix. Don't go away. .info. Robert, before we went to the break, we were just getting to start to talk about the magnetic reversal, and that would be when south, the magnetic north, I would imagine, would be at what we consider the magnetic south right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, how would this affect the orbit of the Earth? Because it's the orbit of the Earth that maintains this magnetic field, as far as I understand.
Well, what I think is, our orbit around the sun, and there's all sorts of things that are going on. Excuse me.
Sure.
But one of them is called precession of the equinoxes. And what that has to do, if I can paint a picture in words somehow.
Sure, please.
But right now, the north and south pole is that the Earth is tilted, believe it or not, away from true north and south.
Right.
And right now the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees away from north and south.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you put a stick all the way through the Earth, and we're talking a long stick, 93 million miles long or whatever it is, but that stick would point right now toward the pole star, toward Polaris. But our axis of rotation, we rotate around that, our axis of rotation slowly makes a circle so that it's moving around and around and around, and 11,500 years ago from now, it will point toward the star Vega, and then it keeps on moving round and round and round, and 11,500 years from then, it will point back toward the star Polaris. So that is what I see is it's connected to the magnetic reversals, and I think what happens as we hit the halfway point is that we have a magnetic reversal. I don't know how that happens. I just know that it correlates, so that every 11,500 years we have that magnetic reversal. There's electric currents shooting through the ground, and earthquake activity increases tremendously. Volcanic activity goes up tremendously, and we have an ice age.
Is there any evidence that there has been in the past a magnetic reversal?
Oh, Lord, yes. The Earth, scientists figure that the Earth has been pointing toward the south instead of the north at least half of history. So this is absolutely nothing new at all.
Wow.
But it's the idea. Some purists, I guess, will tell you that the last magnetic reversal was 780,000 years ago at the Matayuma-Brunhes magnetic reversal. But they're talking about a full magnetic reversal. And what they've failed to talk about is, and a lot of scientists don't want to talk about it or don't know about it, but there are magnetic excursions that show up in the record. 11,500 years ago was the Gothenburg magnetic excursion, and that's when the mammoths went extinct, and the mastodons, the great dire wolf. There's so many animals that went extinct then.
Right.
Then there was a Mono Lake magnetic reversal of 23,500 years ago. That was a European forest elephant went extinct, and there was an ice age, a big ice age. 33,000 years ago, the Lake Mungo magnetic excursion. The Neanderthal went extinct. The Blake magnetic reversal. B11. I can just name.
Okay, all right. You just said the Neanderthal went extinct. If the Neanderthal went extinct, how come we're here now?
Well, we were around at the same time they were.
Well,
and why is it that they went extinct and we didn't?
Yeah.
I do not know. I cannot answer that.
Well,
didn't we? Nobody's asked me that one before.
Didn't we evolve from the Neanderthal? Weren't we part of the evolutionary changes that happened at that time?
Oh no, we've been around. We've been around. I think the Neanderthal showed up somewhere, and somebody will probably correct me on this, but I think the Neanderthal showed up about 115,000 years ago at the Blake
My good Lord.
reversal,
Yeah.
and then disappeared at the 33,500 year ago on the Lake Mungo reversal. No, but I think we humans, as we call ourselves, have been around a lot longer than the Neanderthal. Pretty sure. I'm sure of that.
Oh, okay. Because I'm sure there were other people wondering the exact same thing, because many people believe that we evolved from the Neanderthals. And if we evolved from the Neanderthals, then once we have progressed to this part of our evolution, then the Neanderthals would no longer be around. So that's why I asked you for the clarity, and thank you for that.
Oh, no, that's good. No, but I think if, I know I've had my DNA tested, not my DNA, but the ancestry thing, and nobody ever said there was a Neanderthal in my background. So
okay.
No, so as I know, we're totally separate.
Now, you also mentioned that the solar activity, the sun's activity, is part of the cycle between the ice age that is imminent, in your opinion, to where we are now, global warming, to use that phrase. So does this mean the sun runs hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, triggering this effect on Earth?
Part of it would be that cycle, but no, the other, the sun is part of it. And the sun is certainly why I think we'll be going into a little ice age pretty soon, even if there's not a big one, because sunspots are now at the lowest that they've been in something like 200 years. And the last time sunspot activity was this low was in the early 1600s. There was a time for about 60 to 80 years when scientists were not able to observe any sunspots on the sun. And that was the time of the Little Ice Age, when glaciers started creeping out of the Alps. And they know that for sure because there were some farmers who had to petition for lower taxes because their fields were covered with ice. So anyway, that was a time of very low sunspot activity, and now we are in another such time, the first time since then. So that, I think, is almost automatically guaranteeing that we're headed into a little ice age. But I fear the big one, too.
In your opinion, what will be the difference between the little ice age compared to the biggie?
Well, the little ice age would only last for 60 to 100 years. The big one will last for 6,000 years. Either way, I'm not going to see the end of it.
Yeah, that makes two of us,
But now,
buddy.
one of the things about global warming, by the way, is that NASA in the various scientific organizations, I think there's a systematic deceit going on here. But what they're using is they are combining land-based temperatures with ocean-based temperatures. And I don't think that's fair, because the oceans are being heated, I believe, by underwater volcanic activity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the big things in my book. You know, is when I started writing the book, this was a lot of years ago.
Right.
But scientists at that time thought there were about 10,000 underwater volcanoes in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in 1991.
Right.
1993, they discovered another 1,100 underwater volcanoes off the coast of Easter Island. So they increased the supply of underwater volcanoes by 10%. So they thought that was then about 11,000 underwater volcanoes in total. That was in 1993. Now, NASA admits that there may be 3 million underwater volcanoes. Now, not all of those they consider them active if they've been active within the last 300 years. So, which geologically is no time at all.
Right.
Those underwater volcanoes pump lava into the sea that is 2,100 degrees hot. That's in Fahrenheit. I'm not sure how that calculates out to Celsius, but
Very hot.
2,100 degrees.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 10 times the boiling point. You don't need to know Celsius
That's
or
right.
Fahrenheit for that one.
Robert,
10
we
times
have
the
to take our
boiling point.
news break at the bottom of the hour. Please stand by. Great talking to you. Super discussion. Welcome back, everyone. My guest this hour is Robert Felix. His website is icegenow.info. That's icegenow.info. Robert, in your opinion, what caused the dinosaurs to kind of disappear? A lot of people believe it was because of a meteor strike in the parts of Central America. How does that fix with you?
Well, when I first started studying this, that's what I believe too. You're talking about supposedly a meteor struck in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Right.
And they called it the Chicxulub, which stands for Tail of the Devil. But anyway, at first, before that happened, there were before that decision was made that that's what caused it, there were research vessels from the Mexican oil company Pemex, and they found traces in what they thought at first was volcanic activity. Now, it's hard to be sure of what happened there because the Chicxulub crater is a half a mile below the surface of the ocean, so it's not something you just climb down there on a Sunday afternoon and check out.
Right.
But anyway, a lot of what the Pemex scientists found pointed to a giant volcanic explosion. And I am still inclined to believe that those Mexican scientists, those Mexican oil drillers, were right to begin with. I think it was caused by a giant volcanic explosion, which would have been triggered by the magnetic reversal. So that's where I'm differing with a lot of the experts. is I don't agree with the meteor thing. You know, everything that happens on this Earth, if they can't explain it, they blame it on a meteor. And 11,500 years ago, I was saying that we had an ice age, and we had a magnetic reversal. Well, at the same time, there was that extinction, and so there are a lot of scientists. I hate to say this, but a lot of scientists who were saying, "Oh, that short-based ice age was caused by a meteor." It's just I don't agree. I don't think it was caused by a meteor. No.
If there is a magnetic reversal on planet Earth caused by the sun and the
precession of the equinox.
Right. Would the other planets within the solar system also have reversal of their planetary magnetic fields?
That is a great question, and that is a question that I can't answer. You know, I've been interviewed a lot of times, and nobody has ever thought to ask me that question. I do not know the answer to that question.
My reasoning.
So I guess we better move on to the next one.
No. I'd just like to share with you my reasoning, because maybe it will allow you to kind of come up with a plausible answer. Because if the sun is cooling and heating, and we're the third planet in the solar system from the sun, it would only stand to reason, unless it's something very unique within the core of the Earth that is affected, because we know that we have a certain gravitational mass here. Other planets, have apparently the further you go, the heavier the gravitational pull is. So I was just wondering that if this is happening on Earth, how do we know it hasn't happened on other planets? And when we look at Mars, is this possible? Why today, even though scientists believe at one time there was life on Mars, that there is no life on Mars now?
Well, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but I'm thinking that I correlate this on Earth with precession of the equinoxes. So I guess my first question would be do these other planets that we're talking about, do they have their own precession? Because things precess all the time.
Sure.
The best way I can describe that is if you've ever twirled one of those play tops that you twirl up and then it twirls and twirls and twirls around.
Yeah.
That top never stays straight up and down. It always is tilted a little bit.
Yeah.
And it also curves. Now, I do not know whether other planets have precession. And if they do, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a prediction. If they do have precession,
right,
and if they also have a magnetic field, then I'm going to guess that magnetic field reverses in sync with their precession.
Okay, so let's
take it. Both of those are big guesses.
Let's take it one step further. If this reversal occurs throughout our solar system, it is then possible and feasible that the same occurs in other solar systems throughout the universe, throughout the Milky Way, and so on.
Sure.
What would happen if one solar system is in the negative, let's say the reversal stage, going from positive to negative, and another one is going from negative to positive, and these two electromagnetic fields meet in space?
Oh, I don't think our solar system goes from negative to positive.
I'm talking about the electromagnetic. I'm talking about
planets would do it, but I don't think any of them would be doing it simultaneously.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's move on from the magnetic reversals and talk about something really cool here. The glaciers are melting. Is this a sign of an ice age? Because I would think that if an ice age is coming, the last thing to melt would be the glaciers.
Well, that was something a little bit hard for me to answer at first.
Yeah.
I've been to, I'm trying to think of the name of the Athabasca Glacier, north of Calgary.
Yep.
North of, yes, okay. Well, I've been there, and it is indeed melting.
Yeah. Look at Greenland.
But when you go, yes, but when you go there, and I've actually been there on tour, you see the ancient stumps of forests that used to be there, and
Right.
of course everybody says that's global warming.
Yeah.
But don't those ancient stumps mean that it used to be warmer than it is today? Yes, they do. I've been to the Mendenhall Glacier in Juneau, Alaska.
Right.
And again, it's melting, but ancient tree forests are being exposed. That means that it was warmer back then than it is today.
Well, are they not reporting record temperatures in the Arctic?
Yes, they are right now. I think that has to do with, and I'm not completely up to date on this, but what I do have to do, I think that has to do is with the sunspot cycle, is it's changing circulation in the north. But I think we will soon see that changing the other way quite drastically.
So where it is cold now, it will be warm, and where it's warm now, it will be cold. Is this the basic gist of it?
Essentially, if anybody wants to look on my website, down toward the left bottom of the page, I have a map there that shows where the glaciers extended to in the United States. Most of Canada was covered. Surprisingly, Alaska was not covered. Surprisingly, Alaska would be a good place most of Alaska would be a good place to live during an ice age. Very surprising to me. But I think it's because of the heat from the Pacific Ocean. But I forget where I'm going with this now. Can you redo the question? I went off track myself.
All right. What I was saying is, if hold on here, let me just think where we were going, because now you've got me off on track. Okay, we were talking about the change of temperature that hello.
Okay,
Yeah.
look at my map, and then this coming winter, look at where the snowstorms go, and you're going to see that the jet stream now takes those snowstorms south into the United States, almost identical to the map that I put on my website from 11,500 years ago.
Wow.
So, so to me, the sunspot cycle is changing the meridian flow, and it's changing the jet stream, and so it's sending those storms further south. But it is amazing how closely it matches that map from 11,500 years ago.
My friend, please stand by. We've got to take our final break. And Exonation, you can find more about the ice age that is imminent by going to our guest's website. It's had over 46 million hits, and that is phenomenal. His website is icegenow.info. icegenow.info. My guest is the one and only Robert Felix, and we'll both be back on the other side of this commercial break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, you can always find out about the scheduling we have available for you 7/24/365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network by visiting www.xzbn.net. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away. And welcome back, everyone. Robert Felix is my special guest this hour. I've had a thoroughly enjoyable hour with our guest this hour. Very interesting gentleman. He's got a great website. Visit at www.icegenow.info. That's icegenow.info. First of all, Robert, before we go anywhere, I'd like to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us. You have a great website filled with great information. And you and I were talking off air that you're going to be coming back in the near future because we have so much more to discuss in this great topic that you have dedicated so much of your life to. And we thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, that's great. You know, my wife and I were just talking the other day about when we were kids. And, you know, it would seem that come December the 1st, there would be snowbanks all over the place. Snow was high and, you know, it was just great being a kid. Like, you know, I was a tall kid back then. I'm 6'5" now, and back then I was about 5'11", and I used to shovel my parents' driveway, and it took me a good heave to toss the snow over the drifts that were building up. And yet, when you look at what's happening today, like, I think I had used the snowblower once on my driveway this year. Is this all part of what you are looking at and what is part of the formula when we look at the ice age that's coming?
Well, you're saying that, and yet there have been times, you know, remember the ice storm in Montreal back in, what was it, 97 or 99?
Yeah, but that you know, that's 10 years ago. But since then, there's the weather patterns and the winter patterns are so different. My mom and dad live in Montreal. And we were just, you know, they were talking during the Christmas holidays when we had the family here that there's next to no snow. And I know that my wife and I drove down to Montreal about 4 years ago, and it was like a fall day, you know, no snow at Christmas.
Well, you know, I can agree with that. But, you know, one of the things I write about in the book is about the mammoths. Mm-hmm. And what I talk about is 9 stories of snow a day.
Wow.
But some of the mammoths, you know, mammoths are still being uncovered in Siberia now, even now as that ice melts away.
Right.
And I mean, some scientists estimate that there's still 1 million mammoths left in the ice. But some of those mammoths, and I write about in the book, some of those mammoths have been found with fresh food still in their mouths. Now, obviously, a mammoth is pretty big. I mean, if anybody's been to the Royal British Museum in Victoria, BC, it's wonderful to see that huge mammoth that they've got there. But it was warm enough. That means warm enough and enough food growing around their area that millions of mammoths were able to find enough food to eat.
But would that
and then
not have...
all of a sudden they were covered with ice. And so I think that we're being, you know, we can be blindsided by this. When it comes, it will come in a hurry. And again, I think part of it has to do with the fact that the sun has been the most active in 1,000 years.
Yes.
Up until about 10 years ago. But it takes a while for the ocean and for everything to translate that into what's actually happening on Earth, on land. But I do worry. You know, I moved from the Seattle area to Texas last year because I do believe in what I'm saying. But unfortunately, as we speak, it's like 98 degrees, which is not exactly an ice age.
Right.
But so I can't give you the exact date, but I think we're headed there.
Could this be the calm before the storm?
It could be, I think. And the thing is, you know, people say, don't worry about it. You know, ice ages take thousands of years for the glaciers to bulldoze out of the north. But that is not how ice ages begin. Ice ages begin with huge amounts of snowfall that just doesn't have time to melt in the summer. And there are areas of the world right now, I forget, I just posted about one about 3 weeks ago, but there are areas, I think it's, It's going to the Sun Road in Montana at
Mhm.
Glacier National Park. That some of those areas they're afraid the snow is not going to melt this summer. So I see it happening in some areas right now. Not in yours, but I see it happening in some areas right now.
Yeah.
And part of this is, I go back to our magnetic reversal.
Right.
Prior to a magnetic reversal, the Earth's magnetic field strength starts declining more and more rapidly until it gets down to about 10%, and then it flips. Well, when I wrote the book, our magnetic field strength was declining 5% every 100 years. That was in 1997. Now, according to NASA, our magnetic field strength is declining 5% per decade. Not 5% every 100 years, but 5% per decade, which to me means it's 10 times faster than we thought just 20 years ago. So that to me means that we're headed into a magnetic reversal. That to me means we're going to be seeing more and more volcanic activity, more and more earthquake activity. And as that volcanic activity increases, we're going to have cooler skies.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the underwater volcanoes are going to be heating the seas, and warmer seas and colder skies, to me, is a recipe for disaster.
It certainly is, because what you've got is the perfect mix of a perfect storm with precipitation that is going to be, instead of rain coming down, you're going to have snow, and you're going to have this constant cycle going on.
Yes, and I see it already starting to happen. I mean, that's why we're seeing global warming, is because it's heating in the oceans.
Yeah.
The temperature on the land is already starting to go down.
Well, look at how
the
many.
temperature in the ocean is still going up.
Well, look at how many different species of fish are coming up on the shores dead.
I guess I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, there are reports from around the world of different species of fish that are just flooding beaches, that are dead.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if that could be, because the next time you see they talk about global warming, sometimes they will have a map showing you where the warming is taking place.
Yep.
And notice that it's taking place in the oceans, not on land. They don't say it in words. You have to look at the map, and then you realize where it's happening.
Well, they've always said a picture's worth 1,000 words, so this is a perfect example of that, isn't it, my friend?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Robert, in your opinion, and I've got about 3 minutes left, what should people do to prepare themselves for the imminence of this new ice age?
Well, part of my belief is that a little bit of food on the side saved up, because I do not sell food on my website, so I just want to be clear about that. But just to give you a chance to survive some of them, because before we're totally covered with ice. I think we'll be having times when there's power outages, more and more of those.
Definitely.
But there's only a certain number of things you can do. I've had people ask me that for years, and for me, my choice was to move a little bit south. Now, one thing to be aware of is the entire world does not get covered by ice, and the whole world does not get colder. During the last ice age, Miami was probably only about 3 or 4 degrees colder than it is right now. The tropics and the subtropics, the temperatures would have been almost identical to today. So that's one thing to be aware of. Is
Robert, I've got a quick question for you, because we're running out of time very fast here. Is it possible that one of the ice ages, because I'm sure when the ice melts, does it melt right away, or is it slow? Could it cause a major flood during the melting, or would this just be like the glaciers melting as we see them now, with the sea levels rising at a steady pace?
Great question. One of the chapters of my book is actually called Noah's Deluge.
Bingo, that's what I was getting to.
Yep. About 11,500 years ago, there were huge floods around the world, huge floods down the St. Lawrence, which you're very close to, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, they were huge floods that poured into the Atlantic Ocean 11,500 years ago. There were huge floods on the West Coast. They said that water poured into the Gulf of Mexico fast, that some trees were actually pickled in the briny water.
Wow.
So, yes, very, very good question, and a very yes to the question. Yes, it happens.
Robert, you and I have to say so long for tonight, but I do want to have you back in the very near future because I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I think you've done an excellent job doing your research over 8 years. And I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X Zone. So until then, my friend, thank you for all you do. And for you and your family, please stay safe during these pandemic times.
Thank you so much, Rob.
You take care now. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to get more information about our guest this hour, visit his site that has been visited over 46 million times. Wow. That's impressive. People only go back to a site if they're interested, if it's important, if they can gain information, and if they can learn. www.iceagenow.info. iceagenow.info. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Crystal Beach, Niagara, Ontario.